Welcome to the Career Refresh Podcast. I'm your host, Jill Griffin. I'm a former media and marketing executive turned career strategist and executive coach. I spent my career working my way up and through the ranks of global organizations and startups, and today I show others how to do the same. Join me each week as we discuss the strategies and actionable steps to leverage your strengths, increase your confidence, and develop your career well-being. Ready? Let's do it. Hey friends, this is the Career Refresh, and I am Jill Griffin. All right, I'm very excited about this week's guest. It is my friend, Ali Katz. She's the owner, small batch chef, and baker of Ali Katz Kitchen, which is located in Mattituck, Long Island, New York. That is the North Fork of Long Island, if anybody knows the eastern end of Long Island. And you have to get to her bakery at some point if you are on the East End. And she ships, my friends. So grab yourself some of her Linzer tarts or any of her cakes. Her husband is also making tons of savory treats there. I highly recommend grabbing his fried chicken. But we're going to talk about how she got there. So Ali started her career in New York City's garment industry as a merchandiser for brands like The Gap, Perry Ellis, Reebok. And after September 11th, she pivoted and went to the French Culinary Institute, also in New York City. Since graduation, Ali has worked at the Boathouse in New York Central Park, at the North Fork Inn and Table in Southold, New York. She's also freelanced at many test kitchens around New York City, and she wrote and tested recipes for renowned brands like Hearst and Martha Stewart. And she ultimately created her dream when she launched Ali Katz Kitchen. In this episode, we talk about her journey from employee to unemployed, from student to business owner, and how everything she learned, she did it without actually going to business school, and how she's managed her mind and stayed positive throughout the various pivots and the entire process. We talk about what it's like to own a business and work with your spouse, and the importance of community when launching a business. Ali, throughout this show, mentions many of the local businesses in our North Fork community, and I'm going to put all of their information in the show notes so you can also check them out too. I love, love, love talking about my hometown and the people in my neighborhood, so to speak. And Ali is one of those. So dig in, friends. I know you are going to enjoy this episode. If you ever have any questions, send me an email at hello@jillgriffincoaching.com. And as always, here's to possibility. Hey, Ali, welcome. It's so good to have you.
Hi, Jill. It's so good to be here. Thank you so much for having me on your podcast. I'm loving it. I listen to it when I'm at work. So I like all the little tips and things, even when they're not having to do with my industry. I just like to hear what other people are saying and how people solve problems. New entrepreneurs, old entrepreneurs, people looking for things. So
right.
Anyway.
Thank you. I love that. Welcome. Thank you. So when I ask every guest on the show to take us way back.
Yeah.
And what did you think you wanted to be when you grew up?
When I was little, I wanted to be two things. I wanted to be a farmer and I wanted to be a veterinarian.
So one of the things that I love about your story when you and I first met, I don't even know how many years ago now, is hearing about your first career working in New York City's garment district, being a buyer for a major brand, and then moving, like mentally shifting to going to culinary school. So I would love you to take our listeners through, like, you have a traditional career where you're like going somewhere for 40 or 50 hours a week, and then you decide, I'm going to culinary school. So take us through what was going on with you.
Well, I worked in the garment center. I worked as a merchandiser, which is kind of a buyer of fabrics, but more the person who's like the intermediary between like the salespeople in a fashion house and the design team. So I would work with the designers and I would say like, okay, this season we need like 5 shirts and 3 pants and 4 sweaters. And they would design the line and then tell us what their like ultimate fabric would be that they would want to make it out of. And we would show it to the salespeople and they would say, well, that's not going to sell, but this will sell. And then I would take all that information and I would go to Asia 2 or 3 times a year to Hong Kong, Taiwan, Singapore. I was in Bangkok to find fabrics that would fit into the line or have them weave fabrics that would match what we were looking for and come back and I would cost it all out. And so that was my life. And all of this was before email and before cell phones. So I would be away for 3 weeks and not be in touch with anybody except for like the people that I worked with. We had telex machines.
Oh, yes, of course.
And we would telex. And, also you're in Asia. So you're like so many hours off of what we were here. So I didn't talk to anybody here while I was away. And, it was really exciting in the beginning. I worked retail for the Gap where I did visual merchandising, but then I worked for Macy's in their product development and I worked for Perry Ellis. And fashion was really exciting in the 80s and 90s. And then my last job was at Reebok. And it was for like a golf line. And they were saying to me like, okay, that blue polo shirt, find it cheaper, or those khaki pants, just make them cheaper. Like there's no fashion in that. So I was a little bored and I wasn't motivated. No, I was in my 20s and early 30s and I worked with a lot of women and we worked in the garment center. We'd all go out and we'd summer on Fire Island. And it was more about that than like loving my job.
Yeah. You loved the lifestyle and the women.
I loved the lifestyle. I loved just like hanging out with my friends, but I was bored at work. And they were laying people off and they laid off my designer who had started when I started. So I knew what kind of package they gave her. So I went into my boss and I said, I know you laid her off and, if you can give me that same package, I'll take it. Not knowing what I was going to do. Right. So, and figuring I would just get another job in the garment center. But even though I wasn't happy, but I was like, what am I going to do? I have a sociology major, like, what am I going to do? So I took the severance package. I went to Italy by myself for a couple of weeks. I spent the rest of that summer on Fire Island in my share house. And then September 11th happened. And there were no jobs in the garment center.
Yeah.
So I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I at all. I lived in an apartment. I had to pay my rent. I didn't know what I was going to do. And I had some savings and I always like to cook, and food has always been like a big part of my family and a big part of like travel. And I like to eat. So you didn't go to
culinary school. I mean, you went to the French Culinary Institute.
Yeah,
it was really prestigious.
I did.
Really amazing.
But I will say that it was at a time before it was like the Food Network was on, but like it wasn't like the biggest thing, to go to school. That happened after I graduated from culinary school. So I went to culinary school. I applied. I went. I don't think you can get rejected really from culinary school, but I went to the French Culinary in Soho, and the chefs were all from France, and like it was fun. And my class was a majority of women, and the teachers, in fact, commented like, we have never had this many women come through like a class.
Interesting.
So that I did that and I loved it. And I did the whole culinary program, even though I love pastries, but I needed to know that I could get a job when I graduated. So I did the whole program and I never missed a day of class, which was never the case in undergrad or high school or any of that. I went to class every day. I got an award for like perfect attendance at the end. And I really liked it. It was fun. So that's how I changed. It wasn't intentional. It just kind of was like I don't know what I'm going to do, but I have to do something that I want to do. I guess I could have gone back and gotten a job in the garment center, but if I still did that, I would think I'd be miserable,
But I also think it's important that there was probably something in your gut when you said your colleague got the package.
Yeah.
Now that you have the package, which I'm assuming then is a chunk of money.
Right.
Yes, you have to pay your living expenses and your rent. And yeah, you traveled, but it's like, okay, so what am I going to do with this?
Yeah.
I can, as you said, I could go get a traditional job somewhere.
Right.
Or, you know what? It sounds like you were like, I love to cook. Let's try something different and then go into culinary. So it's funny because you and I worked at some of the same places and we never met on premise, right? Martha Stewart, we were both at Hearst, right? So you're writing and testing recipes. You get this amazing job working for Abigail Kirsch. And again, anyone in the New York City area knows that they are the premier catering operation.
Yes.
For, major events and weddings and like top of the top. And then you went into private chef. So what did you learn about working in some of those larger places, right? So whether you were freelance or employee, I'm kind of looking at it as the same, but whether it's, a Martha, a Hearst, an Abigail Kirsch, you're getting the amazing experience, but then you went on to become a private chef. So tell me what your thought process was there.
Working for Martha and other places that I tested recipes were freelance jobs, and it was really fun to do. But I didn't really want to be in a corporate environment anymore. And those were very coveted jobs. So I wasn't really like prepared to start really trying to come to the same place every day at 9 a.m. again and like have it turn into like a more like the routine that I was in before. Was I going to be happy with that? Abigail Kirsch was a real cooking job. We did all the prep for the parties in the pastry department. And I learned things at that job that I use like still to this day, like what you can freeze, what you can make ahead, how you make things in stages. And I learned things at the Martha Stewart job. In fact, recently somebody was talking to me about, how happy I must be at this, that I finally got to open my own place, and 5 years in, I will say that like every job, whether I hated it or liked it, gave me something that got me to here, that got me to this space. So, although
if you could recall them, what were some of those key, I don't know if they were lessons, if they were like, as you said, like tactical ways of learning how to preserve and freeze food so that you can, use it later.
Right.
What were some of those key things that you learned that, many of our listeners are employees and they, they're in jobs. They may be thinking of staying in their job or looking to get elevated to reach the C-suite or going elsewhere, but there's always learning that can be applied. So I think it's really interesting for people to hear about some of that learning.
Organization is key to baking and anything. And going back to the fashion industry, I used to have spreadsheets of like when a shirt was when the fabric was being like woven, when the color was approved, when the sample was sent, when the sample was tried on. It's the same kind of thing. Organizing your schedule and your products and your time so that everything is laid out in front of you and you can keep track. So when somebody comes to you and says like, well, where is this? Where are we with this?
Right.
You can just turn around and say like, Oh, well, let me look here. It's right here. So that is one of the biggest, lessons that you learn that I learned and I use in daily life, not just only in my
Yeah.
cooking or um, in my other projects, but listening, organization, and being open to change, which I never was a change person. Like I never wanted to change. And since I worked in this field and also since marrying Fritz, who changes everything all the time, I've learned to accept it better and not get myself all like, crazy
Mm.
when like things are not going as planned.
As planned. Okay. I would imagine in culinary arts, that is something that you need to do regularly, is being able to pivot because things may not be going as planned.
Yeah.
As we move just a little bit forward, so you were a private chef.
Yeah.
And then I think our listeners will be really interested to hear, like, okay, so now you've landed within the culinary field. You've worked in restaurants. You're a private chef. You worked in the Calhoun School, private school in Manhattan. You worked in the Ross School in East Hampton, another private school.
Yeah.
And really doing a lot of like farm to chef programs at those schools, which is super progressive and impressive. But the idea that seems to always be a thread for you is this idea of the importance of local, fresh food, how it's benefiting your health, how it's benefiting your environment. And then you guys came up with this idea of doing a pop-up restaurant. So tell me about that, which I think is amazing. Like, again, it's your creativity. And for our listeners, Ali has mentioned her husband, Fritz, more than once. So that's who she's talking about when she says Fritz. But you guys came up with this idea. So take us through what you did there.
So we were both working in the city. I became a private chef because honestly, the money everywhere else was horrible. I went from like a high paying fashion job to, making $12 an hour graduating culinary school. It was a little crazy and not affordable to live easily. So anyway, we did the pop-up because we were both kind of, bored with our jobs and wanting to leave where we were. We were also spending a lot of time out on the East End because my mother was terminally ill, and we were trying to spend as much time with her as possible. And which is why I was at the Ross School. So I'd work at the Calhoun School during the winter, and I'd work summers at the Ross School. So that because it was down the road from where my parents lived. So we were like, what are we going to do? And Fritz was like, maybe we should do a pop-up. And I was like, I don't know. Let's kind of see if there's anywhere that we could rent a kitchen just to like do, I don't know. So I could bake cookies and sell them at a farmer's market. Like I didn't even know. So I found this woman on Shelter Island, Kyle. She was an ex-model who owns very big in the fashion industry a long time ago. And she owned a restaurant and she only serves breakfast. And she was like, why don't you rent the space and like do dinners like 4 nights a week? And we were like, I don't know, maybe we should. It was kind of like a up in the air, kind of like throw your hat in the ring. I don't know. It was kind of crazy, but we were like, why don't we try it? That way we would know if we always had talked about maybe opening something together, because he also went to culinary school. He went to the CIA up in New Hyde Park, and we were like, God, he's been working in restaurants forever. He worked at Morimoto. He worked at Tao. I mean, he worked at the Russian Tea Room, but he didn't want to work for anybody anymore. And I didn't really want to work for anybody anymore. And so we were like, why don't we try it? So we did. And we did 3 nights. I think, I can't remember at this point if it was 3 or 4 nights a week. We did dinners. And then I would bake stuff, I did the desserts. He did the main courses. I did the menu. I ran the front of the house, which I had never done. And then we and then I would bake for the farmer's market on Shelter Island.
It's like, it almost sounds like for any of us that watch Top Chef, it's like restaurant wars. Like you have to put it all together.
Yes, it was kind of like that. And we had never worked together. So that was a learning curve as well. Like we would not get along in the restaurant. And then we would take the ferry back to the Hamptons from Shelter Island. And I'd be like, no talking on the ferry. Even though the ferry ride is like 8 minutes long. I was like, do not talk.
Kind of amazing. All right. So then again, obviously, because I know your story and eat your food, you then you create Ali Katz small batch baking. Right. And I think I stumbled upon one of your like incredible Linzer tarts, probably in one of the shops in Greenport, I was like, who is this woman? I need to find her.
I can't even remember who I sold to first, but I know maybe the Linzer tart, maybe the Linzer tarts they're now at the cheese shop in Mattituck, but I love baking. So I did the farmer's market that summer on Shelter Island, and I created like a little bit of a following. And I met at that farmer's market. It was kind of like an old school North Fork farmer's market. It was Holly Browder sat next to me. Ira from KK's was like at that farmer's market. And Borghese Wines was at that market. So it was like a very old, like people who've been here a while.
Yeah, like Harvey, Long Island, New York people. Yeah. Who are global listeners. That's what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. So it was kind of cool. And it was also like the calmest part of my week. I'd sit at the market, I'd sell my stuff, I would chat with Holly and the person who sat next to me who sold flowers and who actually ended up getting me into Sylvester Manor as a wholesale person. So those people like kind of helped this whole thing get together. I started making quiches for Holly in a commercial kitchen out here. I did some stuff for Ira initially. And then, I started selling my cakes and my cookies around town. And then I met the woman through Holly who owns Good Food, who was opening Good Food, and she needed a partner. So I did that. I was like, I need a real kitchen. I can't rent a kitchen forever. I need a real kitchen. I'm just going to try it. I didn't know her. I didn't have any idea what it would be like to have a partner. I had never built a store from scratch. We did the build out, we did the kitchen, we bought the equipment, we hired, it was a like throw yourself into this kind of situation. And
what I'm hearing throughout everything you're saying is like there had to be some sort of internal GPS or internal guiding, meaning you came out of, I'll call merchandising and garment corporate, right? You came out of a corporate experience after going to culinary school. And then it sort of is just meaning it sounds like to our listeners, it's unfolding, but it's like first you were freelancing. Then you're doing more freelancing and you're working with a top, Abigail Kirsch, and you're working with a top events caterer. Right. Then you're starting a pop-up. You're like, it's almost like you're following your spidey sense. Then you started to get a following for your quiches and your cookies at farmers markets.
Yeah.
As I said at the start of this episode, Ali Katz Kitchen on the North Fork of Long Island. And yes, I'll make sure all of her information is in the show notes because you can buy stuff and she can ship. This what you have created is, yes, it's definitely the baked good, but it's also the food product too. Right. So you're in Good Food, again, a local purveyor on the east end of Long Island. And then eventually you move out of that and you start your own kitchen. Like, what was your thought process to literally put your name on the door and start your own thing?
Well,
And did you want to vomit?
And that all sounds like it all went by so easily. Like that you just
That's what I said. Like, and did you want to vomit occasionally?
You just recapped everything. And I was like, wow, that sounds great. It was so much work and so much stress and so much, do I believe in myself? Can I do this? Like, I've never done this before. How am I going to raise money to do this? Like, just all the things that you learn about probably in business school, but I didn't go to business school. Like I had to write a business plan. I had to find people who would invest with me. The good part of it was when I started Good Food, I have several friends, my dad and my old private client invested in with me. And when I left Good Food, I paid everybody back except my dad. And my private client, I said to them, I can pay you back. And they said, we know you're going to do something better. Keep the money and put it into that. And
my God, I love that.
For someone to believe in you like that,
yes.
Is
but so, it's also the reputation you created with integrity and showing up and delivering. You also get the credit for that.
Right. I will. I mean, I'm a hard worker. I never missed I never missed going to my private chef's job. I just never I work hard. And I think that that's the bit people know that I do, and I try to make my product as good as it can be. And, so what made me open something on my own was that I had a following now here on the North Fork. And, I was like, am I going to leave that store and just get another job? Or am I going to try to do it on my own? I think I can do it. And I built out that kitchen, with all used equipment. And I, did it, Fritz helped me, but he had another job. And when I opened that store, I was the only person who was there, every day. And I didn't have an employee. And I realized what I could do. And these were the days I'd be open for it. And I, still have a pretty large wholesale business. So really the retail part of it was just supposed to be extra. I still work with Browders. I work with a couple other local farmers. As I mentioned, I work with Sylvester Manor on Shelter Island. And then, I started opening this door for retail and it started getting busy. And I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it, so.
Yeah. And again, for our listeners, this is a mixture of salads, creative, savory items, using all local products, working with local farmers and small business owners, the local vineyards, the restaurants, really an example of what's possible when you tap into the community around you that is abundant and the community also showing up to meet. It's such a beautiful experience to go in there. And then, as you mentioned, Fritz, he's working on the stocks, the soups, the prepared meals. So this idea that, again, started from I'm going to culinary school and I'm not really sure where it is and where it is today. I just think it's such a beautiful example of what's possible when you continue to tap in and trust yourself. And I mean, you also know that you're clearly good. You said you always loved to cook. So you're doing something that you love.
I do love it. Even in the summertime when it's 100 degrees in the kitchen or at Christmas time when you're all cookied out. I saw a cookie recipe on probably on Susan Spongin's, newsletter thing. And I said, I got to try that cookie. And it's oh my God, haven't you made enough cookies? But I just like to try new things. I love to own a business that if I don't want to make that anymore, I'm not going to make it anymore. Although, certain things I don't think I could ever stop making because
people love them too much.
People like them too much and they'll just bother me until I but and some things don't work. Like for a while, I did the jar salads. Those worked for a time. And I think we're going to bring them back in a different way. But, oh, here's my cat. But, but you can figure out what works and what you can manage there has to be a balance, I guess, is what I'm saying. There has to be a balance of what you feel you can do and how you can get it done and what people want. And, people have become much more respectful and also patient since COVID.
Mhm.
I have found, this community supported us so much during that time. We fed a lot of people during COVID with curbside pickup for a year.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there were certain people who came every week.
Oh, I remember getting curbside soups and also getting some curbside Christmas cookies.
Yeah. So, I mean, again, a testament to this community that, we live in on the North Fork, the farmers, the fact that we can get, such amazing produce, the people that we deal with on a regular basis are, for the most part, great people. I don't know. It's just a really, I sometimes it sounds strange because I never ever thought I would never not live in New York City, but it's this community. It's like a fairy tale almost,
Yeah.
It's
really, really good, solid people. And you're, within 100 miles of New York City, if anyone is wondering. So I'm going to ask you a couple more questions before we go today. And the next question I said is what was harder than you thought it would be?
It's harder than I thought it would be. I'm not like a computer books. I'm not a business person, even though I am a business person.
I was going to say, you're a business person, my friend.
But I'm more on the creative end of it. So for me, I'll always put off doing the money, business, email part of the business. I'll always put that off and put that off and put that off until I have to do it, because I like to do stuff with my hands. Even in my time off, I ran into you at the knitting store last week. Why am I knitting when my hands hurt? But I love it. You know what I'm saying? So always I find the business part of it, the books part of it, harder than I thought it would be. And I also find social media to be a difficult thing to keep control of. Tried to make the social media fun, and I literally have grown that account. I don't know. I just it's all been through pictures and word of mouth.
Yeah.
So
share with our listeners, what does your morning routine look like? And what I mean by that is how do you mentally prep for the day? You've got a lot going on. We talked about your organization. We talked about you're keeping lists and all of that. Right. But I just mean what happens before you actually step into the kitchen and the bakery aspect of your job? What's mentally going on with you?
I am a roll out of bed kind of person and go. I am not a take it easy in the morning and slowly have my cup of coffee. The night before, so every night I have a chalkboard in my kitchen, and I kind of write down everything that I have to do. I somehow in my head plan the day, thinking I can do this first while this is in the oven, this can be going on. I have to roll these cookies. I have to, send out a newsletter. It turns out that the newsletter always ends up being at the end of the day, most times, just because I can't get my act together. Because when I'm in the kitchen, I'm always even though I feel like I might be done with what I'm doing, I'm there's always something else to do. Yeah.
Well, Ali, thank you so much for being here today. I'm going to put all of your information in the show notes. If anyone is coming to New York City or out to the east end of Long Island, Ali Katz Kitchen is a must stop. You must go and get all of the delectable treats, and you can also order and she can ship to you online. So do it. Supporting.
Thank you so much, Jill. This was great.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Career Refresh podcast. If you're enjoying this and you want more information, go to my website, jillgriffincoaching.com. There you can find information on how to work with me one-on-one or my group programs, or even bring me into your workplace. I'll put the link to my website in the show notes. But hey, listen, before you go, do me a favor, rate and review this podcast because it definitely helps me get the word out to people everywhere so that they can also thrive in the workplace. All right, friends, I appreciate you. I'll see you soon.